and welcome to the Power 365 show. Full show notes for this episode can be found at nz365guy.com/236. Before we chat with today's guest, here's a quick message from our sponsors. Today's show is brought to you by me. 2020 has been a hard year for many. If you're not sure about the direction you're taking in your career, you may need a coach. If this is something you're considering, express your interest today at nz365guy.com/coaching. Now let's get on with the show. Welcome to the show. Today's guest is from Seattle, Washington. He's the Microsoft Chief Financial Officer of Microsoft Business Applications. He knows where all the investments have been made in the Power Platform and Dynamics 365 and where they all went in the past. You can find him on LinkedIn. Jeff York, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's good to have you on the show. I think the last time I met you was over a year ago now. It was BizApp Summit in Atlanta.
Back in the good old days when we could actually get to see each other in person.
Exactly. My gosh, how time's flown, and of course how our world has changed in recent times.
I know. You can definitely say that again.
Yeah. So tell me a bit about you. Family, food, fun. What do they mean to you? So kind of all non-work related things.
Yeah, so we have a little pod of 3 boys at home, kindergarten, 4th and 5th grade, so they keep us moving. And we're all now starting to plot our moves this winter and see if we can get some skiing in. But the whole COVID thing is putting a damper on things. So we always used to go to Whistler, and it was one of our favorite places to go. And right now you can't cross that border without a 14-day on the other end. And so anyways, we try to get out and about, and the 3 little boys keep us busy.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't realize that it is only a short drive, right, from Seattle up to Whistler. And I didn't even think that you'd have to do a border lockdown to go in there.
You have to do a 14-day quarantine on that side. It just sort of, it negates a long weekend or a week up there anyways.
Yeah. So what are your options around Washington?
We have a couple mountains that are close around here. And then if you're up for a drive, you can go to Oregon or Idaho, and there's some great mountains as well. So we'll still find it.
You'll work something out.
Yeah.
You'll work something out. Nice. What do you do when you're not working?
And so then outside of that, there's always soccer games sprinkled around with the boys. And then we try to get out and ride bikes and walk around the neighborhood. I taught my oldest son how to surf behind a boat this summer, so that was a ton of fun.
Wow, yeah.
You get the theme of it's wrapped around 3 little boys.
Yeah,
you can tell.
Yeah, totally. What about food? I mean, in Washington, every time I go there, I cannot avoid going to the fish markets and getting a nice salmon burger or something like that. What's it for you?
Yeah, seafood. I'm a big fan of oysters around here. Are always pretty good. So a nice glass of wine and some oysters. And we kind of have a little bit of everything. We've got great Italian food, Thai food, sushi, some good steak places. So we try to get out and about and explore around as well.
Very nice. Do you like scallops?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, from where I'm living, I can literally drive 5 minutes down my road, jump in the water, and I can swim out and get scallops. So
I don't even know what I would do with one. I've never prepared them myself. So
all you need is a little butter, a bit of herbs, and beautiful. Do them on the barbecue or something like that. Very nice.
Perfect. I hope there's a little wine on the side there too then.
Oh, always got to have wine, right? New Zealand's got a very good, thriving wine industry, so a lot of options there.
Yes.
Yeah, very good. So tell me a bit about your background in Microsoft. How long have you been there, and kind of what are the hats you've worn that have brought you to what you currently do?
Yeah, so I think I'm here 17 or 18 years maybe. And prior to that, actually, I was at a small CRM company here in Seattle. I was at Onyx Software.
Wow.
And my future wife was at Microsoft and flipped me a job description that looked pretty interesting. And so I came over and I was in the U.S. subsidiary for a couple of years. Then I moved abroad. I went to Portugal, and I was the CFO of our business there for a couple of years. That
No
was
way.
before kids, and so that was a super cool life experience, both personally and professionally. And then we came back, and my wife was pregnant at the time, and so we had our firstborn here. And I was in what today is known as WCB, but I was in like the enterprise headquarters or strategy team. Then I did a planning across the entire company. I ran the planning process, the strategic planning and budgeting process for the company for a couple of years. And then after all that, I realized that I worked at a product company, had never worked in a product group. And so I came over, it was still called MBS at the time,
Yep.
for a short little while. And I've been here ever since. And, the business has morphed around a bunch. My role has changed a bunch. And it's been just a really exciting period of time. It was, in hindsight, it was an amazing and smart move.
Yeah, listen, let me just jump on. We'll come back to this, but Portugal, it's one of my favorite countries in the world. Where were you, Porto or Lisbon? Where were you based? Lisbon, I suppose.
Our office was not in Lisbon proper, but it was like right outside of Lisbon. And then I lived in a place called Cascais, which is about 30 kilometers outside of the city, and it was out on the coast. And it was a little town that a bunch of people had their second home in. So they would come out on the weekend there, and traffic was pretty bad to get into the city. And then during the week, they'd go into the city and work.
Yeah.
And then we traveled all over Europe. And what was interesting is on our flight home, we had a longer list of places we wanted to go visit than on our flight over there.
Yeah. I so believe you. I mean, Porto's got to be the favorite place, for me. I went down to the Algarve a bit as well, but Porto I just love.
Yeah, it's gorgeous up there. Gorgeous up there.
And of course, I love port, so I went through a lot of wine caves there. It was so good.
The hotels, when you stay there, they always have a little bit there. And I remember when I went to interview there, they put me up in a hotel right on the water, like the waves were crashing against right under my window. A little port on the side of my bed, and so I signed up. And then, sure enough, when I literally moved there and I was in temp housing for, I don't know, a week or so, I was definitely not in that hotel. And I was like, oh, the honeymoon's over. Now I am inland right now.
You gotta work. So you say you've been in biz apps now across, a good few years. You were there before, correct me if I'm wrong, before James Phillips, headed up engineering. So, we talking about Jujar days, Bob Stutz days? Bob
Stutz was there for a little while. I was there for one day with Kirill right before he left. Wow. So Bob Stutz and Jujar was there. And then James came in shortly thereafter.
Wow, right back at Kirill. Haven't heard his name for a while.
I know. Well, it was one day of overlap.
Yeah, I've got a feeling that he worked for an Australian company for a while, like the telecommunication company in Australia. Although I might have that wrong.
Yeah, I honestly don't know.
Yeah. No, do you know what? I feel he went on to something like the virtualized desktop of the competitor to Microsoft. I
was
think
he at VMware maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
Wow, and man, I remember many conferences attending where he would get up and speak and stuff. And wow, okay, so you've definitely been there a while, and especially through the Jujar period. What was the massive tipping point, the change? Like we noticed it out in the community and in the market when James Phillips came into role. There was almost like a resetting, a reestablishing, a total change in the organization. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, the business, just if we compare today to back then, is just in such a different place. And we as a company, James as an individual, the entire engineering team, we definitely went through a reset. And gosh, if you walk back 5 years or so, I mean, we were still heavy into all the on-prem businesses that we had purchased. We had different engineering leads. So that, there was a CRM person, an ERP person. James actually was off in a different business group with Power BI. You remember debates and wars over XRM versus other things. And so
Correct.
like sometimes you couldn't use the word XRM, but yet customers wanted to buy it, but we didn't actually have a SKU for it. So we would sort of back end work something up. We started to then, use terms like CDSA and CDST, and we'd talk about all those things. And then similarly, it was, complicated when you got into the big deployments, and we had some big deployments that didn't go right. And so then there were questions around, stability and product and what's the future here. And, coming under a single engineering lead, James is a fantastic individual and engineering lead. He put in place, together across all the business, but Project Bedrock, Project Bahnhof, to get serious about the product, the stability, the implementations, the cadence by which we would ship out all the new features. So we do that twice a year now. Because it was a single engineering lead, we moved through all the different, quote unquote wars over different platforms and technologies. We launched Dynamics 365 and started to make real the notion that, hey, they're all connected and they're part of the same thing. And so, gosh, we're just in such a different state right now, that it's really impressive, as a business, and the breadth of the portfolio and the continuous innovation is just staggering. We're just in such a great place now, I think, because of a bunch of those moves.
Yeah, there was a period of time there that, a lot of the people in the market were going, your release cadence is way too frequent. There's so much happening. It is just constantly drinking from a fire hose. The thing is, now I just think it's accepted as normal, and kind of that ramp up is over. And I was even, we're recording today, which is the first day of Ignite, and I'm like, man, there's not enough stuff being talked about here. There's not enough new, because I suppose your appetite for so much change has been built up now that you're just always looking for what's new, what's happening next, where to, where's the growth.
Yeah, and it's always a double-edged sword, right? Because we want to take all the very best innovation and get it out as fast as you can.
Yeah.
But, the ecosystem's broad and wide, both customers and partners and ISVs, and you can't just keep throwing things at people without the right amount of preparedness and readiness beforehand.
Yeah. Back in the day when you started in this business group, it seemed that Salesforce was always very front and center, and we were always looking at them and what they were doing. And, I know from, being working at a partner through that period, they were my main competitors. Every now and again, I'd come up against an SAP implementation of their CRM, but it was definitely front and center. This was in Australia, I was operating at the time, was clearly Salesforce. Yet, since we've gone to Dynamics 365, I'm finding we don't hear so much. There doesn't seem to be what are they doing? We should do the same. And has that been like a fundamental shift in thinking internally?
I think you're on to something, and it is interesting that, years ago, and maybe it was where we were as a business and a product, we maybe were chasing more. And so we'd talk about, hey, they have that, and gosh, we should either build or buy that.
Yeah.
And I feel, internally, similar to how you talk, we don't have those discussions. It's less around, oh, they have that, so we should too. It's more of, what is the need in the marketplace? What do customers ask for? What do partners signal? Where do we want to take our innovation? What's that next step? And, sometimes we'll go build down a pattern, and other companies are doing it in a similar place, and sometimes that's not the case, and we're the only one out doing a scenario like that.
Yeah, it seems now like with the Power Platform particularly, and the Power Apps, Power Automated, that type of thing, we definitely are dominating from a leadership point of view now. We're not the ones being followed, if you like, and where was that smarts to get onto this as early, and creating a low code, no code platform as early, is what Microsoft did in the situation. What was the brainchild and the thinking behind that, and the, I suppose, understanding of a really large market opportunity?
Yeah, we probably write chapters on that, and there are probably other people that sort of lived it, and many elements of that was around even before my time. Like, I think the predecessor to Power Apps has been around for a while, but I will say, if you and I talked briefly about like the XRM talk, I think for a long time we've realized there's this place where customers want the finished solution, and then there's this many other situations where, hey, there'll never be an app built for my micro vertical, business scenario, but gosh, I could get help and support from the platform that was built over there. And so I think it took us a while to figure out a way to satiate both sides of that camp, to both have the finished products that we'll call today Dynamics 365, and then an ability to go let someone purchase that platform and build from that, but go customize in a way that no one else in the world would ever do. And so, thank God we're past those debates, and we have both offerings, and we're pleased with the momentum of both.
When you're looking forward at the growth, when my first time in Seattle was 2012, and I was at the Advanta campus, and there was kind of a joke that BizApps was, inside Microsoft paid for the company picnic at the end of the year because it wasn't a big pillar of Microsoft's business. And I just saw the other day an analysts briefing. I forget who the Microsoft person was on that call, and now the BizApps is a $3 to $4 billion in that type of range business now within the organization, and definitely, from Satya, what we're hearing is a key pillar of the Azure, the Microsoft 365, and then the BizApps story is really become a key part of the business.
Yeah. If I go back on my own history, when I moved into this business, I remember senior people in the company saying, "What are you doing going over there? You're crazy. Aren't they about to sell that part of the business?"
Yeah, that was the talk, right? Yeah.
For sure. And, I can categorically say that there's been a shift across the company that, I don't worry for a second about that. We're central to the strategy. And so, if you zoom out for a second, we've had these discrete battles by each cloud. So Azure versus the competitors there. And, that's a highly competitive, very few competitors in that market. And, that's running on its path. Office 365 is a different place, and we came from a different position of power as that cloud transition happened. But there's also, there's competition in that business. And so, our differentiation as a company is bringing the productivity and the infrastructure together with the business applications that actually run everybody's business, and bringing all those together will truly help customers digitally transform the way they run their business. And so, our belief is, hey, it's not just one of those independently, but our ability to bring all those together, and with our teams and our partner base is the thing that helps us differentiate. And so we're very squarely within the strategy of the Microsoft cloud.
You mentioned their digital transformation, and we've been talking about digital transformation for 4 to 5 years now. And I saw a meme recently going around, with COVID and all, which was, the meme was, who's had the greatest influence on digital transformation in your business? And was it the CEO? Was it the CFO? Was it the CIO, or was it COVID-19? And of course, this calendar year of 2020, we've seen a lot of businesses been hit by COVID, and it's really affected what they're their potential lack of digital strategy or digital culture within the organization. And I was speaking to a colleague in the UK last night, and he was saying he's getting 3 major deals, and they're one of the big GSIs, a week now, just around COVID-related systems that they're building on Power Platform.
Yeah. I think like if there's nothing else the world has learned out of the COVID pandemic is that, gosh, you better be agile and resilient as a business. And you think about every business model got checked at the outset of that. And you think of restaurants, many of them sadly are out of business. And many of the ones that are still in business, they changed their business model. And, some are selling the raw ingredients. Some very high-end restaurants that never did takeout now do takeout, and it's a fabulous experience. And, you move from there to retail. Their definition of customer success used to be, gosh, greet you at the door and do amazing things. They can't do that now. Medicine, I think never would have been done over the phone in the past. And now I think that's a central strategy to all sorts of healthcare organizations. So, I mean, gosh, you could just walk down every single industry and say that they're incredible impact of what COVID's done, and so you've got to be resilient and agile to get through that.
Yeah. So FY20 is over, and I talked to Hayden Stafford halfway through FY20 about the investments that have been made in the business, and he took some eye-watering numbers and factors of increase in investments from and of course he was focusing particularly there on the sales side of the business's global sales footprint, the headcount that he had, especially after James on his side of the business has seen a phenomenal growth in the headcount of the engineering side of things. In hindsight, how is FY20 finished out for you, and then what are your thoughts around FY21?
Yeah, we went into FY20 with, and it sounds like you and Hayden talked about it, but we went into the year with a great deal of investment. And then a couple of months later, the company invested a couple of hundred on the sales side, a couple of hundred headcount into the business on top of that, which for us in Microsoft is just sort of unheard of. Like we always do things in the annual planning cadence. And it was tremendous because it meant that we were out of the drama and hysteria of an annual plan, but also it allowed us to go get very pointed on what we wanted. And so we went and hired a whole bunch, predominantly external hires. And one of our learnings was, gosh, when you do that during the annual cycle, you're in with all the other businesses. And so you get a lot of internal hires, which is fine, but it doesn't help you, move forward, as a company. And so that was, we were incredibly optimistic and bullish about that. Of course, COVID hit. And in the first days of that, we paused and, everybody in the industry paused and said,
totally,
what does this mean? And specific to business applications, I think we all thought, hey, would business applications as a category be relevant? And we came out of Q4 with a resounding yes to that. And so we beat our internal expectations. We grew new business. We thought we would decline in the pandemic. And so, what could have resulted in a really rough year, we came out pretty happy with the performance. And so then switched that, and we're a couple of months into FY21 now, and we're equally bullish. And so, we had our learnings in Q4 that said, yes, in fact, business applications as a category still is relevant. We've seen plenty of the competitors still print pretty good growth numbers. Everyone's tampering down a little bit, but growth numbers are still something to look at. And we're up, many hundreds of extra sellers in the business, so that helps, and those will turn productive this year. So we're incredibly optimistic. We also stood up a set of free customer offers in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And so we were testing that as a, can we get a viral motion going where we get customers up and running and it's free, and then let's get that deployed, and then we can grow from there.
Yeah.
So that had good resonance in the market. So we're just about to finish up Q1 here, and we're feeling good about momentum.
So tell me about Softmotive.
So broadly speaking, we hadn't done acquisitions for a while, and there were some done in my very earliest days or before then, and they were always.
So what was the first one that you were involved in? Was it the marketing pilot, or had that been done, or was it Parature, or
Parature? He really tests my memory here. I can't remember if Parature happened. Like the purchase happened when I was here, or I got here and we had just done it.
And
we were in the earliest days of bringing that in. And if you go back to our discussion around James coming in as the single engineering lead, and we were doing a bunch of, call it foundational work to the product. It just wasn't the moment to go do any sort of acquisition, to go add in new complexities and code bases and all that sort of thing. So we just sort of strategically put that on pause. And now with the product where it is, now was the moment for us to reduce that pause and start to see what's going on out there. So Softomotive was, the RPA space is one where we think we'll have a whole lot of growth and innovation. We think there's a lot that can happen there, and we think that we as a company can go help customers. We think that there's a whole bunch of automation that can go happen, just radically help move forward business. And so, with that in mind, we were on a build pattern for Power Automate. And we came across Softomotive, and it seemed to make a bunch of sense. And so we pulled that one off.
Yeah. So does this mean that you've moved in across the business to a cycle potentially looking? I know you'd always be looking, but is there a more serious look at going, okay, how do we rapidly fill some gaps, if they're there, or take advantage of new markets?
Yeah, it's a place where we did always look, and we do continue to look. And I would say now we're probably more in a position where if the right thing comes along, we're in the position on the engineering side where we're not doing that foundational work, but we can go acquire the right technologies and IP and fold it into the broader technology.
Yeah. Okay. So that it could be, and once again, an interesting landscape for the rest of this year that we're operating in. And of course, Hayden's new replacement's just been announced.
Yeah. So Vahe is going to start the role October 1. We're counting down the days because I remind him every couple days on Teams. He pops in on something, and I say, "Hey, Vahe, come on, get over here."
Yeah.
He's a fantastic guy. So I've worked with him. He comes from our Western Europe business.
Yeah.
Not business applications, but he was running the all-up Western Europe business, which is a very huge and complex market.
Yeah.
And prior to that, he ran, I'll get his resume probably the details wrong, but he ran the mid-market, which has a heavy play with partners as well. So he comes from this background of knowing the complexities of all the different geographies. He was a big champion for business applications for us when he was in Western Europe. And prior to that, mid-market and partner, and, having some appreciation for what that means to work through. So, gosh, we're super excited to bring him into the family here. And I think that he's just going to do wonderful things for us in his new role. So as I said, we're counting down the days for him to get here and get his feet wet.
Yeah. So the ramp up time, being that he's been in Microsoft so long, would be less. But Are you envisaging much of a ramp up time for him to get across? Because he'd be responsible for the global sales business, right, of BizApps.
That's right. Global sales for BizApps.
And so with no handover from Hayden, although I saw Hayden, I think, was one of the first people to congratulate him on taking the role on LinkedIn when it happened. And, just even around the logistics, how hard is it for, I don't know, to come in from Europe to the US now with COVID and reestablish himself? Is that, do you think it'll impact, or do you think he will function?
I mean, sure, there's complexities to the business that I'm sure he's not aware of from his current role. But I have to say, Alyssa Taylor, Hayden Stafford, myself, and the teams, we spent a good amount of time with Vahe when he was running Western Europe. And we partnered with them through a couple of business transformation projects. And so he's definitely no stranger to the business. And so, we'll bring him in and do everything we can to gently expose him to all the gory details of things. But I think his ramp will be pretty quick. And he's respected in the field community internally and externally, but that'll also help. I mean, a big part of his role is to go galvanize across his old peer group, all the leaders of the areas and work with them, work with their teams, understand, where are we having momentum? How can we fuel it more? Where are we having friction? What can we work through to remove some of that friction? Same with partners. And so I think, his field background, and he's been at the company a long time. I think, he can step into that role pretty quickly.
Yeah. So just pivoting on to what the analysts are saying in market, how much do you listen to what they say? And I know you influence what they say to a degree as well. But what are you hearing that's making you feel like, we're on the right path here? And then are there any kind of checks and balances that you're like, should we be looking at this or doing that or something else? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I spend a decent amount of time with Wall Street analysts, and then Alyssa Taylor, who runs product marketing. She and I do a bunch of tours as well. And there's some common threads for sure. I mean, first of all, the background of knowledge as you go out into that population is varied. And some have a deep understanding of this space and our history, and many, many don't. And so I do have to say, like, a lot of times we somewhere very quickly in the first few minutes of a dialogue, we walk through the history. Where'd we come from? We started in an on-prem business. We did some acquisitions, very mid-market. We started to build the cloud business, and that's grown, very well. And it's in a vastly different state than it was even a year or two ago. Yeah. We'll walk through the portfolio. So we'll do a little bit of the history there. And then we go into the strategy of, first of all, like, why is Microsoft even in this business? What and why do we have a business application business, and how does that relate to Azure and Office 365? And you and I talked about that a little bit before. We go into the strategy around and our belief and position on data, and just how, data now moving out of all sources everywhere, and our collective ability to harness that and take insights from it, not trap it in silos, bring it back to the customer so that they have, real-time insights of what's going on either in their customer base or their supply chain or what have you. That's a critical key to a customer either performing better for their customer base, transforming their business, or what have you. So that's usually a good chunk of the dialogue, and we go in through an understanding there. And then we get into competitive differentiation, and then we get all sorts of questions like, why don't you go buy this or that, or are you going to buy big things? Are you still a mid-market vendor, or are you not? So we'll talk through that. Wow. And in terms of the space, I think, business applications, again, as a category, I think there's widespread belief that there's, a lot of headroom in that market for growth, and those that can delight customers and continue to broaden their set of offerings will be the long-term winners in there. So
That's interesting about the mid-market assertion they're making, because
we smile every time we get the question. We're like, I hit play to my pre-recorded response to that one. So.
Yeah. But sometimes I wonder if it is a bit of the FUD that the competitors, I worked for a while
for sure.
in federal government in Australia, and I was always up against IBM. And IBM would just roll out this, Microsoft SMB, the mid-market.
Right.
They can't play in this space. Like, who are they? And of course, history is kind of proving them quite wrong now. But it is funny, as in that there is that perception, and it's definitely an old school perception rather, I feel, than a modern one.
Yeah. And I go in and share, hey, 96% of the Fortune 500 use Power BI, and 57% use Dynamics 365. And so you get some eyes on that, and then you start to walk through some of the examples and stories, and they're fun to talk about.
Yeah. So in the recent digital events, that are being, you guys are starting to roll out once again some big brands, Coca-Cola most recently, that I saw, obviously adopting the Power Platform. Just looking at digital events, we're in the middle of one now with Ignite. There's been a few run this year, and there's been a whole raft of community digital events. And I don't know, I'm feeling a bit fatigued maybe, and maybe that's because, I have a need to attend them all.
Yeah.
And if you like, my perception might not be the perception of, Joe Blog customer. And so what's your, after running so many, what's your bead on digital events and where things are at with them?
Yeah, I mean, your fatigue comment, I can totally picture. I'll say we're in that season. So we came off Inspire, and now we've got Ignite, and so like we're, the next 2 months will look very different than the last 2 months, I would say. But more broadly speaking, it's fascinating, as an industry, that we all can shut off in-person events and have, I think, some relative success with digital events.
Yeah.
And I'd love to get your specific perspective, because I was feeling like, gosh, I miss the in-person, and how can you have any success with digital? And we've been proven wrong there. And I think, a lot of people are incredibly pleased with the offerings. And one of the things that really caught my eye was, gosh, you're just so much more inclusive with these, because those of us that are not in the time zone, and I was talking to someone, it was either Australia or New Zealand, said, hey, I never made the trip. It was just too far. It's a whole week. And gosh, now I can pick up some of these events. And I thought, for me, I was like, oh yeah, I didn't even think through that angle. And so numbers seem to be up. Now the question is it the same level of engagement? And clearly we all miss an in-person sit down, shake your hand, really read the room. And hopefully, God willing, we can all get back to that state someday soon. But I think in the interim, it's nice that digital can help us all have some sort of connection in the meanwhile.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the inclusiveness, right? I mean, I don't know. I would have spent, probably in the hundreds of thousands on transportation over my career, in going to, whether the, Microsoft Partner Conference and wherever the geo it was, BizApp Summit, and its predecessor Convergence, all these different events. I was going to the US at least 2 to 3 times a year just for conferences. And I know a lot of people could not do that, right? Their careers wouldn't allow it. It's the downtime from work. There's so many different factors. It's more than just the flights. And I think the numbers speak for themselves, how inclusive these events have become. And I think for, it's kind of like those of us that have been around for a while, are we just hankering to the good old days? And this is not this is not the world anymore, right? We're in a new world where things are faster, where people want to consume information. I think Microsoft, when I was talking with Alyssa, the numbers, off MBAS, for example, a mind-blowingly different factor than in the in-person, right? And so if you think bang for buck and are you getting that knowledge transfer, I think you're getting it. I think the old school folks are missing the week away from work, week away from maybe family, having a few more beers than they probably would in a normal work week and things like that. I think that nostalgia, is obviously gone. But I think for the newcomer coming in, they're going to know no different. Like my kids don't know what a landline phone is. Right? Because they never had one. They never seen one. It's never been in our house while they've been alive type thing. So I'm wondering if it's that same type of thing. This is the new norm.
And I wonder if we don't land in a spot somewhere halfway in between where we go back someday, hopefully, to the ability to have an in-person event, however big or small, but with a huge digital presence on the back end. And so for those that can't make it that week or don't want to travel or can't, that there's actually a digital presence there as well.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the community? But particularly once again, since James come in, he often will open his events with some phenomenal numbers of community engagement now. And I'm talking about the effort, the communication, the blogging, the videos, the content, the meetups, the groups, that type of thing that happen that are non-paid, that people are doing this because they're just passionate about the technology. What impact have you seen on the business by this massive groundswell of community getting behind the products, falling in love with the products, and really just evangelizing on their own time?
Yeah, I think it's one of those like intangible things about a business that's just incredibly important, and it's hard to put a number or a word to the value that it brings. But it's just so critically important. And, from things like, hey, are people enjoying the things they're working on to, is there also this sort of organic viral way for people to engage and interact and like or not like, and ideally even get a feedback loop back to our engineering team to tweak or change or build out or adapt. And so I think it's just incredibly important. And I think for us, one of the more promising areas there is the Power Platform. And so, I think we always dabbled, we always had some. I think it's stronger than it has been. And yet I think it's an area we want to continue to put muscle behind. And Power Platform is just this area where you get a lot of organic groundswell, user communities. You think of Power Apps in an environment, in a customer. There are some where they purchase tops down, CIO makes a decision and pushes it, but more than that, you see these places where, the citizen developers, they find on their own, they solve a business problem, and then usage just starts to be pervasive. And that is like product health right there when that happens.
Yeah, so true. Are you guys looking seriously at, Africa and the countries in Africa? There just seems to be a massive, what I'm observing as well, a massive groundswell across Africa at the moment in adoption of the Power Platform dynamics. There seems to be a lot of growth, a lot of people moving their careers into the space. Is that something that you're observing?
Now that you said, I'll have to go look at it with that lens. I can't say that I have, but I think you just pointed me, and so I will.
So in closing, tell us what numbers can you share with us around the growth? What is 2021 looking like for you from what are you thinking?
Yeah, so we we go through a process each quarter. We help write up the script for Amy Hood and Satya as they do the official earnings. And, it used to be that we only disclose the total Dynamics growth rate, which has both the cloud and on-prem.
Yeah.
And about 2 years ago, we said, I forget the exact date, we started to say, well, hey, that cloud one's incredibly important. So we started to disclose cloud. And then every once in a while, we size the business. And we just did that recently. And so Satya shared that the Dynamics business surpassed $3 billion with over 60% of that in Dynamics 365.
Wow.
So that excludes Power BI. That's the Dynamics franchise. And so last quarter, the Dynamics 365 piece grew 38%. And so first and foremost, we're over $1 billion, growing pretty healthy, and we have aspirations and eyesights to take that much, much bigger. But we're pleased with the progress there. And then, more importantly, we're seeing these little grass shoots of new product categories come in and take off. So Customer Insights, as an example, which is our CDP offering, was the fastest growing D365 app ever. We feel great about that. It's a new category. That market's not been made, and so we're really bullish there in that space. Power Apps, Power Automate, we see incredible MAU and usage there, which is promising. Power BI is much more mature, and so we're very, very pleased with both the size and the growth there. And then you go to the what we used to call F&O. Today, commerce, finance, supply chain. We shared that 4,500 organizations are using that collection, which makes it one of the fastest growing SaaS solutions in its category. So across, the portfolio is broad now. And we sometimes use a slide where we break into 6 discrete TAMs. And so it takes a long answer like that to go through the different elements of our portfolio, and each has its own set of competitors and benchmark there. But we're, as I said, we're pleased with the top line. We're pleased with some of the newer emerging categories. But we also have our sights to, there's a lot more ahead for us as a business.
Yeah. So good, so exciting. It's good to hear the update. Okay, just before we wrap up with some quick fire questions, who do you recommend I should get on the show as a guest in the future?
Well, so I have 2 for you.
Okay.
I sincerely doubt you've talked to Vahe, and he's in fact not even in the role. So I think
we will wait till later in the year for him till he gets his feet under the desk.
Think you should do that. And Toby Bowers is another name that I think you haven't talked to.
Yeah, I know Toby.
Okay.
But no, I haven't had him on, but we've done some of those live stream at events with Toby. So, and of course he's just taken the ISV role, right? Yeah,
so that's right. And I think that he both works with the field connection. He works on the marketing side, and then he plays a huge part on the ISV side. And it's just such an important area for us to get right as a business. And I would say we're like in the very earliest stages. And we think that we've got some things going with the ISV Connect program, but it's by no means said and done and solved for world hunger. And so it's an area where we want to get right. And so he's just a fantastic guy, and he's working across the whole team there in that space.
There's certainly a lot to be done in the ISV space. A lot to be done. I know you'll
agree with that one. That's probably a whole nother dialogue.
Yes, that's so true. Anyhow, let's do some quick fire questions. These are random, and that means they're fully random. They're not targeted.
All right.
Are you ready?
Okay. I'm ready.
What's the first concert you ever went to?
Grateful Dead.
Wow, okay. The Grateful Dead fans, they sound like they're a particular type of fan, aren't they?
It was an eye opener. I think it was like 16, and it was the first concert of their last year. It was quite amazing.
Crazy. Who would you like to play in a movie?
Who would I like to play in a movie? Oh my gosh.
You're like James Bond or somebody like that?
Well, because you put that there. I don't watch enough movies, so I'll go with James Bond until I come up with a better one.
Okay. What are you most looking forward to in the next 10 years?
Seeing my boys grow up and making sure that they're in the right place.
Yeah, so true. If you could know when you are going to die, would you want to know?
No.
Yeah, I agree. Would you rather win the lottery or live twice as long?
Live twice as long.
Yeah. It might be possible. They say by 2050 we'll become immortal, right? So who in your life inspires you to be better?
My parents.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. Well, we're done. It's been great to have you on the show, Jeff. I really appreciate it. It's been a long time coming, and I'll tag you in when this all goes live.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast, and it was a lot of fun, and all the best to you.
Hey, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Business Applications MVP, Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 guy. If there's a Microsoft guest you'd like to see on the show, please message me on LinkedIn. Please like and subscribe. If you want to leave a review, go to nz365guy.com/review. It lists all my current reviews and gives you options if you want to leave your own. See you next time.